So I want to wish everybody a super happy Ophiuchus season, man. And what does that mean? I am the 13th sign of the Zodiac, Ophiuchus. It was my birthday 2 days ago. And since I don't have a cell phone, I couldn't post the whole thing, but I'll do it incrementally. And so I want you to enjoy what you can of my show. But the reason why they erased or got rid of this 13th sign is because it happens to be the only man, Acephalus, I think was his name. Ophiuchus was actually a real man, and it's this man wrestling a snake. Okay, and I know this is really weird and trippy. I'm explaining my mystical history here today for you. My Ophiuchus path. Well, the Ascension Handbook I found on the ground in North Charleston, and somewhere in West Side Santa Cruz, I found this The Way of the Superman book. So my sacred sexual learnings are also stemming from a somewhat reckless spiritual teacher, Pisces spiritual teacher. He was telling every man to hold back 1 out of 4. But I, being extreme, I had to go all the way to learning, to getting, becoming someone who's just, fully opposed to the idea that the white stuff is really for anything but children. So I bring this up because the Indians described this energy they called it kundalini, the energy of the snake rising up your spine. Once I was at a dubstep event, and I was about 33 years old. The master Masonic number, and I remember when I was about to peak, I was able to hold it, and I could actually see. It looked like 2 huge cobras. The spiritual kundalini energy of my partner and I there. So I thought, well, this must be enlightenment, sexual in a sexual form. So, but the other thing is, the caduceus and the fact that I was hospitalized in the Santa Clara Valley Trauma Center for 5 days last September was a really heavy transitional initiation for me. Hopefully, I mean, the fact that they didn't inject me with the inoculation, the experiment, they certainly made me do a PCR test on myself, and so there's got to be a clone of me out there, apparently. But it's Lisa Renee, and people say they use the symbol, the caduceus, because it's supposed to be the inversion or the Luciferian, the lower. If you think about it, the lower impulse of man coming up to take over, coming up to the crown. So, okay, the Luciferians, like Bruce Jenner, it's the opposite of the tantric or Taoist sexual master. Okay, you're not respectfully harnessing the energy of sexuality for bliss or creative powers or energy. You're destroying it, cutting it off, inverting it, or bringing the reckless animal snake to your head. So, the reason why a lot of people hate California or feel the hatred or fear of it, or don't want to come here, if you check the Indigo Angels material about that from a few weeks ago, it explains it to some degree. But these same forces seem to have really powerful weapons, like I've said many times, pointed here, which can, like, if you're not really spiritually strong, it can scramble you, man. It can make you afraid. It can make you judge. It can make you think your friend is going to hurt you. It can make you paranoid and got to get away because California's a Virgo. And that energy, the Mercury energy, is just, it's mutable. It's a metal. It's a toxic metal. And it's very easy for them to become, if they're not a spiritual master, to become persuaded. And it's all through anxiety, okay, your worries. You got to come up with survival. It's the survival mentality that caused humans to lose their creative power, the obedience to the official reality, okay? So here in California, if you live here and you're not wealthy and you work 2 or 3 jobs to pay the rent, you work 7 days a week to pay the rent, it's very apparent and clear that the black magic hex cube system has you believing, in a way, it's completely service to self. You're completely oriented toward yourself. And that's the problem with, that's how they pull all this shit on California psychically. Because if they can get you totally oriented toward your little me self only, particularly in Santa Cruz, it's rampant. I mean, the cost of living. They busted a house across from Safeway on the west side, where I think it was it 20 or 40? I think it was 40, including children. 40 Mexicans were busted in that house. Now they had, triple bunk beds in the garage, and they would always have somebody sitting in a metal chair in the front yard, chilling, to make sure the infiltrator, the deceivers people couldn't get in there to bust it. So, the Mexican people from Spanish blood, Mexicans, they don't have a problem with rent, man. You know why? Because they know how to get along. La familia. La familia is the term that Latin people used, unfortunately, most often to each other, but if they're cool to everyone, they treat you as family. I know of a man named Kita, a blonde-headed man who was raised by lesbians in Santa Cruz. He always seemed really good-natured to me, ironically, I guess. So he told me when he was a young man, he hitchhiked to Mexico. And the further south he got, man, the closer he got into Guatemala, the indigenous Mexican people would invite him over, let him sleep on the couch, and feed him without saying anything, without mentioning it, man, like it was just normal. Imagine that. Well, that's the reality before the Dark Lord's Hollywood people influenced you to be afraid of your neighbors. I heard there's neighborhoods where the Rothschilds live in England where people don't, the big mansions where people never meet their neighbors. Is that what you want your life to be like, man? Okay, so if you only have time to take care of this one body, how are you going to be friends? How are you going to meet the right woman to have a happy life? Okay, the only people who are happy here in California are people who come out here to live their dreams and who are doing it. Even if they have to work 7 days a week, if they're doing what they love, hey, man, they're in the right community. They're doing what they love, okay? So the snake, the battle over humanity is, like I said before, it is all mostly in our mind. And the way the Zetas, the other antiverse, or whatever their names are, I don't know the names. I've just been here long enough, and I'm empathic enough to just have observed it so many times, particularly after studying what Lisa Renee claims from her being a walk-in for the last year, and Dan Willis. And like I say, them being the greatest two, but those two being the greatest ones, but all the others, handfuls that are making disclosure, man, God bless them, and God has blessed them, because we're reclaiming this. And what Eve Lorgan said is very, very pertinent in this subject as well. So the love bite and the heart-based love bite, the non-sexual love bite, has been a facet of my life. And so what it is, the idea, I'm very strongly convinced. You can't be sure of any of this stuff. It's all make-believe, because humans, okay, look, now I remember a good way to encapsulate this idea. Because like I said before, I began my journey here in this type of thinking with Castaneda books when I was 16. And before the black magicians who run Hollywood were beaming their media, before they basically, I guess, somehow bribed the FCC to let them have a full monopoly. Basically, they took over the FCC 100 years ago when they created Hollywood, as far as I can tell. And that's why the microphone gadgets are another reason why they're not being labeled like a pack of cigarettes. Because they don't want us to know. For some reason, they'd rather get rich selling us things to chemotherapy and poisons to combat the cancer clusters. So, the Dark Lord's people like to get rich, killing you, use mind control to create a situation in your mind where there's no option except for what the Saturnian ones give you, okay? This is what they've done to the human, the three-dimensional slave reality. Okay, so this Ophiuchus season is about what would life be like in nature, in the unobstructed version, okay? What would it be like if you actually have your mind? Well, what I have to say is that, and this happens in Charleston, this happens everywhere, but particularly New York City, Charleston, Florida, California, all the coast. So, you're a loving, or respectful, a good person, a good-natured person. But you're running late for work, or you're really worried about your mom or dad, your brother or sister, your children, or whatever in this certain dramatic situation. You're concerned. Okay, so what happens is, if you're not 100% clear about what the fourth dimension is, it's called voice to skull. They'll beam thoughts into your head. And it's always going to be fearful, violent, negative kinds of things. They don't want you to be empowered. They don't want you to take back your mind. They want you to think, this is what I got to say to you. You know who you are, who identify this as you. You're wrong. Those violent and manipulative, those narcissistic thoughts are not you. The narcissist is the deceiver's mental illness pattern inside the human. That's where it came from, and that's why there's no psych meds prescribed for that. Even though they admit it's a severe mental illness, because they don't want it to be healed, because it's how, just like solipsism and moral relativity, this is how they run things. But when you don't believe in solipsism and you don't believe in moral relativity, and you realize the oneness is real, and you realize that souls are eternal until they're ready to go to nirvana, or whatever you want to call it, when you realize the whole entire reptilian race and all the Zetas, really, only reason they have power is because you've allowed shadows and the fear and the demonic lower emotions to control you. At least now, that's the way it is now. Because we've reclaimed some amount of our free will. We've reclaimed some amount of the second Bardo here. So it's up to you and I. It's imperative. It's our job if you want to ascend. It's our job if you want to be born again for real. All of you who claim to be Christian and you act upset, and then you act manipulative, and you act controlling and dismissive, and you don't acknowledge other people's emotions as something you've got to have some amount of respect for, you're not Christians. You're fakes. The Christian is someone who brings the vibe of Christ, Jesus, Yeshua, which is accepting and loving and respectful as much as possible to all beings, no matter how disgusting, impoverished, or rich they are. Okay? So the Ophiuchus battle here, the reason why they didn't want this in the Zodiac, is because the man is wrestling the snake. And I'm here to tell you folks, it's a possibility, and it's a possibility with me, that this man has wrestled this boa constrictor down, meaning the draconian's thoughts in my subconscious, meaning through meditation, through Buddhism, through shamanism, through even excessive ganja, if done in a somewhat respectfully prayerful way. I wrestled it down. Okay? It's man over matter. It's mind over matter. It's man over material. And it's spirit over matter. And the spirit will win this. And let it win with you. Let the peaceful, respectful spirit of Christos reclaim your body.